Well, everybody, thanks to the magical powers of Reddit, I've managed to meet the only other full adult human being in the world who enjoys reviewing every horror fan's childhood favorite show, Are You Afraid of the Dark? He's from a show called The Jack of All Nerds Show on YouTube and on Patreon, as well as jackofallnerdshow.com. His name is Michael Maxwell. Hey, Michael.
Hello. How you
How's it
doing?
going?
It's. I mean, you know as well as I do the technical difficulties we've had getting this going, but
Oh boy, yes. Our
uh,
apologies in advance. This is both of our first collaboration, and we're using Skype and already learning some hard lessons. But
yes, yes.
it's
But
gonna be what it is, you
I,
know?
I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, there was a redditor who recommended your channel, and I hadn't seen it before, and I've loved every minute of it. I've only
I'm
watched
glad.
up to the episodes that I have done in my own recap and review shows. I want to be influenced by by your
Yes.
jokes.
Yeah,
So
so you're doing yours in order, which is smart. I started mine, I want to say almost 12 or 13 years ago now, and I just started doing them completely at random. I don't know why. I guess I didn't think I'd be doing them this long, or that I'd ever get to all of them. So I think I have about 12 episodes left in the whole series. I think I'm done the first three seasons now, because eventually I realized, oh, it's smarter to do them by season. So kind of went back and filled in the blanks. So I have reviewed all the episodes from what we're going to do today, which is take a look back at all of season one.
yeah.
So let me know, what was your like introduction to Are You Afraid of the Dark? What are some of your like early memories of the show?
I honestly, as an adult human being, the actual episodes themselves don't really stick out in my memory from childhood. The things that obviously do are the opening sequence,
Hmm?
the campfire scenes, the storytellers themselves. I have a lot of fond memories of. But yeah, overall, like the stories themselves, I know I've seen a lot of them, but upon a rewatch, it's like seeing them for the first time. So
Yeah, totally agree. There were a couple from this season that I remember pretty distinctly, but my more memorable ones for some reason, which might have been because I was a bit older when I was watching them, are from seasons like two and three. My
mhm.
most memorable episode by far is The Tale of the Dead Man's Float, which is going to come up later because at the end of the episode we're doing a very special giveaway. Thank you to Michael. So stay tuned for that. We'll announce a little bit more about that. Who's your favorite Midnight Society member?
I think you and I might have a differing opinion on this.
Oh boy.
So, as far as now, when you say favorite Midnight Society member, do you mean favorite storyteller or favorite just personality wise? Because there are two. I have two different answers for that.
Yeah, yeah, I guess personality wise.
Okay, personality wise, I would probably say Gary. He's just like I was into magic when I was a kid. He's into
Yeah,
magic,
he's a good close
So
standby.
yeah, so I
I would
kind
say
of vibe with him.
David, I think. David, I find he's only, I think only what this season, maybe two seasons.
I think he's two seasons because I know at the start of the second season, I noticed he had like a growth spurt that no one else did.
Yeah, yeah. I found him the most relatable, and I also think the like really bizarre love triangle between him and Kristen and Gary is just strange in the show and like very underlying. They address it maybe once, but other than that, it's just like the three of them team up in this weird way. And who's your least favorite? I have a
Ooh.
guess.
Well, fortunately, he gets killed off in the second season,
He does.
and that would be Eric.
They don't. Do they address it? Does he move away?
Nope, I did a video when I did the first episode of season two. I addressed that because I was like, in later seasons, when other people leave, they mention it, and I was like, they do not mention it at all, which means they clearly killed him and buried him in the forest.
It's because it was so gory they couldn't possibly mention it in detail. I should mention two things. Since I binged all of these episodes once more and went through them all, the only targeted ads I get on YouTube are for Playmobil. So that probably speaks to the demographic we're dealing with here. Again, two grown men. The other thing is the caveat that I don't know if you know anything about me or my job. I'm an actor and I do some voiceover stuff. I got to work with Rachel Blanchard, who plays Kristen. I
Oh,
was on a show on HBO for the past two seasons called You, Me, Her, and I played her next door neighbor. So I got to meet her and work quite closely with her, and she's very lovely. But that can't help but kind of color my opinion on Kristen. I'm
yeah.
still honest about her, but
Is that I mean, I don't have any ill feelings of Kristen. I do feel like throughout especially the first season, everyone gives her so much flack for no
Yeah.
reason whatsoever.
I think because she's beautiful and it's like cool to make fun of hot people in the show. Like for kids to just be like, ugh, she's already beautiful. She's got to like, we got to take her down a notch. That was cool in the 90s. I like her as a storyteller, but they make her, they always give her a gimmick. So she's always in a costume or she's doing a voice. She's like, so she's hard to like, but she's a very likable person and actress.
Yeah,
So,
her
oh, go ahead.
stories are definitely my least favorite.
Are
Um,
they?
yeah, we'll get into it because it's mostly season one. Actually, in season two now, I have found one of her stories that I enjoyed. So,
See, one of her favorites, one of my favorite episodes is hers this season. So,
oh,
my
okay.
God, conflict already. So I think we'll just go based on when they aired. There's some discrepancies online as to the air dates, but I'm going based on IMDb, which has their like the actual
That's
date they first aired.
Yeah, that's what I went with too, because I think the discrepancy is the Canadian release versus the American release.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So,
So the first one up, I think, regardless, is Phantom Cab, a classic
correct.
with
Yes.
Denny and Buzz, and our introduction to the many appearances of Dr. Vink. What did you think of this episode?
So this episode, the thing about my review show is that I grade them on a pass fail. I'm kind of harsh in that regard.
Wow. Okay.
So I know for this we were kind of rating them out of 10
Yep.
in certain areas. It was a very different beast for me. Even the episodes that I enjoyed are not necessarily rated that high
Yeah.
because of the different categories that we have here. But yeah, this episode I did not really enjoy. I feel like there is a good story here, like a good scary story here, but I feel like it's hindered by the poor acting
Yes.
and the silliness of the plot. If that makes sense.
Yeah. It felt like to me they got a group of 8-year-olds together to brainstorm things they thought were spooky. And then they just like mashed it together into a 20-minute episode. They're just like, it's a series of like, yeah, riddles, but there's a doctor who likes brains, but there's a dead guy whose head spins around, but there's a ghost cab, and it's just like none of it really makes sense together. There's no real stakes. And
Yeah.
I hate Dr. Vink. I know it's kind of sacrilege to say that as an Are You Afraid of the Dark fan. I shouldn't say I hate him. He grows on me. But I find these standby villains in the show with him and Sardo, uh, they both to me are like I tend to not like their episodes because they're not scary. I find neither of them to be scary in the least.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I love them both for knowing because I'm also an actor and voice actor as well.
Right.
But so for what they're doing, for what those actors are doing, and just having the time of their lives as those
Yeah.
characters, I enjoy them for that aspect. But I have to agree, not scary in the
You're
least.
totally right. And that's something like, that's why I feel bad when I say I don't like them because you're right. They're bringing like a kind of precision to the show. They're grounding it in something because the characters are very consistent. They're like lively. They're doing a kid show. But I guess as adults, what I'm drawn to, I should speak for myself, are the like scarier episodes because this show to me versus Goosebumps was all about like kind of real scares as a kid. Some of the
Yeah,
images in these episodes are horrifying. So now when I look back on it, episodes like this that are sillier, I tend to kind of like, I don't know, not like. And you're 100% right in saying the acting in this is woof. Both of the boys are pretty which I have no qualms on my channel about disparaging child actors. I've met a lot of these actors now living in Vancouver where in Canada where a lot of the show was shot. So I'm careful about what I say. I have removed some of my episodes after the fact. But the acting is something else.
yeah. It was one of those things where, and I comment on it a lot, but where it feels like they tell the kids to like scream, but they don't tell them what they're reacting to. And
100%.
so
This show has an infamous moment for me where I think both of them are just like, and
yeah,
they clearly ADR are screaming, and you're like, they aren't even breathing. They're like, it could have been a still photo.
it's the brain scene, right? Or
Yes.
is it the brain or the hand? Whatever's in the jar, and he shows it to
Yeah.
them, and they're just It's just like
Yeah.
it's so bad.
Or Denny's reaction of, ew, cool. Again, is to me like they've taken every young boy's idea of what's scary. But like, you should trust an adult to write this, not a bunch of children. So I should say before the rubric we kind of set up for this is we're looking at plot, we're looking at acting, we're looking at setting, we're looking at scares. Those are kind of the things I was focusing on, which is it's insane that we're treating this show this seriously, but I kind of love it. I love like watching these episodes with a rubric in front of me that I'm grading these by. It brings me such joy. I don't know if it's worth going through each of those. If there's anything that sticks out to you as particularly bad, as I said, the acting to me is pretty rough. My lowest rating is on the scares, though.
My lowest rating was on plot and acting. I feel like don't get me wrong. Scares was like only 1 point higher than both of those.
Yeah.
And I feel like the plot holds the potential for the scares back because when you think about the character of Dr. Vink in this first episode, there is the potential there to be something horrifying. I mean, there's this weird old man living in the woods and experimenting on body parts and stuff like that. That could be creepy, but this whole like answer my riddles. Like,
I know. It's bad news.
Well,
Yeah, and there's nothing like tangibly scary. They talk about him needing a specimen, but he's in no way like threatening.
yeah.
If he was like physically intimidating or there was some means that they couldn't escape, but instead he's like, no, get out of here. It's just so, I don't know, bizarre. My lowest rating is, go ahead.
I was gonna say he has that one moment I think of legitimate menace in the episode, right? With the phone, where they doesn't want,
right.
He grabs the phone and then he gets kind of like intense for just a second.
Yeah. My one scare I liked is with Flynn, the ghost cab driver, when his head spins around. It's cheesy, but it's like, to me, that's the one point where you're like, oh, that image sticks with me in this episode. It seems like a real threat. It's a little bit of a surprise, I guess. Overall, what'd you give this out of 10?
It's actually probably not as low as I would have expected because I gave the setting a really high number because I do feel like the setting is good. And if everything else around the setting had been up to par, I think it could have been a really good episode. But overall, I gave it a 4.75 out of 10.
I gave it a 4.25 out of 10. I put the setting at a 5. I agree it was cool, but they light it so well. They're in this forest, and at any given point, there are 3 full spotlights on them in the woods. And the scares really drag it down. The acting is pretty rough, too. I gave the acting a 5 out of 10, actually, because I think Flynn is really great. And Dr. Vink is Dr. Vink. For all the reasons you said, they bring a certain like liveliness to the show. We also were tracking kind of the lamest moment in the episode and the scariest moment in the episode. Did you do that as well?
I mean, I didn't note it, but I can easily.
Yeah, I've kind of already mentioned it. Flynn's spinning head to me is, for me, the best part of the episode. The lamest part being when they approach the house and there's laughter in the bushes. It's another thing that is like, they never bring it up again as to why that happens. It just is another thing to be like, whoa, yeah, that would be scary.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on the scariest moment being the head spin for sure. Lamest moment, I think, is probably when he's solving the riddle in the cab and he's just going,
oh, forever.
Yeah.
Forever. I got it. Wait. The question was, we're all like, this is not Dora the Explorer. Stop this nonsense.
Yeah, just say it.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. I think the next episode I have is Laughing in the Dark.
That is correct.
An infamous episode with the very strangely named Ouija and Josh. What were your thoughts on this?
So this episode, might be my highest rated. I think it is my highest rated out of the season, just because I feel like overall most of it's pretty solid. I mean, it definitely seems like it borrows inspiration from it, which is creepy, and I feel like the way they did the scares is pretty decent. Silly names aside, I had issues with that too, and that, of course, that becomes a thing throughout the series is weird names.
Yeah. Oh, all over the place. I think I mentioned that early on in mine as like a trope of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Which it makes sense. They have to have memorable characters. I think people with nicknames tend to be kind of more I assume Ouija's maybe shorthand for Luigi. Who knows? Or he's got very cruel parents. Yeah, there are like surprisingly good scares in this. Again, isn't it like I remember parts of this. I remember the clown, I remember the haunted house, but I forgot he goes home and is stalked alone by a clown and like locked in his room, and the balloon moment, and like there's actual scares that I think are original. Uh the acting is what it is.
Yeah,
Josh is a lot.
he is a lot, but I feel like he's the one carrying the episode, and I feel like when
Totally.
he's afraid, you feel like he's afraid, except for his weird
Yeah.
manic silverware gathering.
Well, and the scariest villains in the show, I think, they pair them up with irritating characters so that as an audience, we root for the villain a little bit. And in this, we're kind of like, you're sympathizing with the clown. I don't know his name. Zebo. Because he's such a dick early on, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a few of that this season. They introduce the trope of a character who's a villain or kind of becomes a villain in his own right, right?
Oh, there's an episode coming up that has probably the most sinister child in the history of the show.
I almost listed her as my favorite villain. I love her.
Yeah, she's great. Yes. So this episode I think has decent scares. I think the acting is pretty good. The kids are. I mean, Josh is really the only one that's given much to do. The other characters are just background and they give exposition. So, but they're not terrible. The setting, I think, when we're at the fun house and stuff like that, it's good.
Not the hockey rink bedroom. Looks like it was on Extreme Makeover Home Edition, and they're like, "Oh, I shouldn't have told them I like hockey."
It was pretty extra for sure.
Yeah.
And of course, pleated, shorts aside.
Abound, yeah. I gave the setting a very high score. I gave it a 9 out of 10 because I think the carnival thing, it's the only time it shows up, I think, ever in the series, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And it's done very, very well. The haunted house thing is clearly like a set cobbled together and like would never actually occur in real life, but
I mean,
it's good.
They wouldn't put actual fire breathing through a walkway.
I know. I wish. I mean, I would absolutely go through that haunted house. And I like the plot. I kind of, it's the thing with the cigars and like, I don't know. I think it's kind of inventive. The acting got my lowest mark at 6. I just find like, I think Ouija, that the actor who plays Ouija is stronger. And we spend so much time with Josh, who I think is more kind of hammy, but for a reason. He's playing a harder character to play. He's not at all friendly. He's actively a jerk at every moment.
Yeah.
And then he comes full circle. So I ended up giving this an 8 out of 10 total.
Okay. Yeah. That's same here. I actually was 8s across the board in all ratings, so it ended up being an 8 out of 10.
Nice. My lamest moment is that very strange move that I will never forget, where Josh physically moves Ouija in front of the camera and then moves him again, and they've moved to the carnival. Like, the weirdest direction that makes no sense. And then I mentioned earlier the balloon under the door is my favorite moment that says "give it back" and pops in his face.
For me, the scariest moment is there's one scene in the actual funhouse where he's in the mirror room. And for just a split second, he catches a glimpse of the clown, but not the image that we see of the clown in most other circumstances. Like, it is horrifying, and you just see it for just a moment. And I feel like when you see it, you're just like, ooh, it gives me chills. Lamest moment is, I mean, there's a number of lame moments in this episode. I'm offended at the treatment of chocolate pudding.
Oh my God. It's like, there's a charge for that, I think.
But I would say my lamest moment is just because I don't understand how it's possible, is how Josh managed to buy a box of cigars to give to
nowhere. The way I'm justifying it in my head is he stole it from his father or something, but.
Yeah, but I mean, he left the house. That's why I'm like, where did he get them? It doesn't make any sense.
That's true. The 90s were a different time. There were cigar shops on every corner. Actually, this would have been the 80s, wouldn't it? Late 80s, I think.
No, still 90s.
Okay.
It premiered in, I think, in Canada in 91 and then in America in 92.
Gotcha. Yeah. Next up, I have Lonely Ghost.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. I again, this is the introduction of the David Kristen subplot in the beginning, and I just find them both really endearing. I don't know why. This is I mean, the elephant in the room. This is the introduction of Beth, who I only wish had appeared in more episodes.
Don't touch my stuff.
What did you think of The Lonely Ghost?
So overall, as a story, I did not find it particularly scary at all. Beth is so extra that I've referenced her in later videos. Just like I'm like, don't be a Beth, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah,
she's just so nasty, which is great. It's a great villain since there isn't an actual villain in the episode. But she is a great antagonist. But I just didn't find the ghost moments scary, and I found the plot involving how the little girl died to be the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard.
what was it? I don't remember clocking if they explained it.
So it was that her something about her mom finds out that somebody is sick and has to go away, and she tells she like calls or leaves a message for the grandmother that the daughter is supposed to go and stay with her, but then the mom just leaves, and then the daughter en route to the grandmother's house gets bullied by some kids who chase her back to her own house, and then they lock her in her own bedroom, and then the grandmother never got the message, so no one ever checked, and the girl just died in her bedroom.
What do you mean? That sounds realistic. I'm kidding. That's terrible.
What? I'm like, how did she get locked in her own bedroom? And I had so many problems with it.
The thing I liked about this episode is I think the concept of bully children making people in the neighborhood spend a night in the haunted house. I love that like concept. That to me rings as super true. So I liked the whole sequence of her being locked in there, just wanting to prove herself. And the reveal of the ghost on the first time, I thought was really great. And then steps through the mirror and the help me on the wall and stuff like those to me are more like adult scares. The part that where it runs off for me is the grandmother at all, the nanny character. It's another moment for Beth to be a complete monster. But also the end when how they figure out she switches places with Beth and then the nanny just gets absorbed into the mirror. Is she killing herself to be with her daughter?
Yeah. Also, I was very unclear on she's a nanny, but her name is also Nanny. What?
Oh yeah, very bizarre. Yeah. I found the ending satisfying until Beth gets released, but I like the idea that she gets trapped in there because she has stuffed animals she wants to go see. Like, it's the strangest thing they set up to be like, this bully teenager loves stuffed animals enough to be drawn into a closet in a haunted house. It's absurd. I ended up giving it relatively high marks though, because Beth is awful, but Beth is like makes this episode so entertaining, for better or worse. I gave the plot a 7. I don't mind it. I hear what you're saying 100%. It's like I didn't clock that about how the girl died, but yikes.
Yeah, the acting in this episode actually pulled it up for me. I gave the acting in this episode a 9, 9 out of 10. But everything else was really low. So the 9 brought this episode up for me. Overall, I gave it a 4.25 out of 10 overall.
I gave it a 6.5. I really like Beth, and I think I found it scarier than you did. I think I think the ghost is well done compared to worse ghosts I know come up in later seasons.
Yeah.
The frozen ghost is pretty bad. There's just clearly a kid painted silver. I think they made her look scary. I think all the writing on the wall and stuff is like a scary concept. Lamest moment is meeting Nanny when we first meet her for the first time, and she's like, Beth pops out of her room just to be like, "Don't touch your old hands." You're like, I thought it was a dream sequence. It's so bizarre. And then I really loved the emergence of the ghost initially.
Okay. All right. I would say that's probably the scariest moment of the episode is the first appearance of the ghost. And you're right. Like the makeup on her gives her that kind of sickly look. So even if she doesn't necessarily look ghostly, she looks sickly, which is for when you're dealing with children looks terrifying.
Yeah.
For me, the lamest moment in the episode, and I referred to it multiple times in my review, is the aunt when she sees the sign and she's like, ah! Like,
So bizarre.
what is that?
And also very clearly doesn't put the sign in right and it falls, which I don't think was intentional. They were like, just walk away. We'll make it a creepy moment. Like the house doesn't want to be sold.
Yeah.
Next up, I got Twisted Claw.
Yes.
Twisted Claw. Go ahead.
Interesting little factoid about this episode is that this was I'm pretty sure in America. It might be the pilot episode just all around, but this was the pilot episode for the series.
That makes sense to me because I feel like it's got that classic, like, recognizable storyline of the monkey's paw situation, right? Where wishes go wrong. It has some very, not even scary, like, horrific moments of very real terror. Like, you just killed my parents, or you just raised my grandfather from the grave. Like, there's these very, scary moments. And the acting it's fine. I think the acting is salvageable in this. Yeah, there's a couple Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes that drift into the territory of like adult scares that are these like psychological, like, oh my God, I just wish this kid would lose the race and he's being mauled by a dog. You're like, oh, the like humanity of this is horrendous.
Yeah, I do think the wishes, especially that wish, that is so silly because when he grabs that claw and he's like, I'm gonna wish for something that I've wanted since I was a child, and it's like, hold on, you're still a kid. But also, that's been your single biggest wish, is to beat Bostic at this race.
I know.
Get out of here.
Yeah, get some better aspirations, Kevin. The setting in this is not at all scary. Even their houses are like huge, clearly soundstage sets. Like, and it's all bright and like they could have done a lot more with atmosphere. I think even the like witch or whatever they're alluding to, the person who gives them the claw, she's bonkers. Like, she's silly, right? It leans into kind of Vink territory. And the plot, I like the plot because I think the monkey's paw thing is clever, but it verges on frustrating because you're like, they should just be smarter than this. How many times is it going to take them to realize their wishes are all going to be misconstrued?
Yeah, like, right. This kid just wished for your parents to be dead. I mean, not in those words, but like that's what happened. And then right after that, you're like with this thing in hand. You're like, I wish my grandfather was here.
I know.
Like, stop it. Just stop.
Yeah. What a strange thing to say too. Yeah. So everything was kind of middling for me. It could be really scary if we were measuring this by like looming eeriness and like potential devastating results. Like, I was just watching this like mouth agape the first time, like, did he just kill his parents? Like the gravity of some of these moments is like, oh my God. But none of it's scary. We don't really see anything creepy. It's all just like circumstantial stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like that was a missed opportunity because especially when he wishes for the grandfather to come back.
Totally.
Like, that would have been a great opportunity for some sort of a zombie makeup or something. And I don't feel like that would have cost too much money.
Agreed.
But the camera following nothing except a shadow is just like, it's not scary.
No, agreed. And it also has a really drawn out ending when the wishes get reversed and they go through everything to be like, but the phone didn't break, but my medal's gone, but the car's not there. And then he's like, I think I've figured it out because the phone is gone and the car. You're like, oh my God, like we got there 10 minutes ago. We know what the end of this is.
Yeah. I was going to say, it was interesting that you mentioned Vink with the actress who played Mrs. Clove, or Miss Clove, sorry, because this was pointed out to me in a comment on my video. But that actress is actually, or was, because I think he's passed away, but was married to the actor who played Dr. Vink.
No way.
Yep.
Wow. Nepotism at its finest. I'm into it. My lamest moment is, I gave it a 6 out of 10. What'd you give out of 10?
6.25.
We're pretty close on these, I think. Yeah. I clearly liked Lonely Ghost a bit more. Lamest moment was the punk kids. We didn't talk about this. punk kids are bizarre. They give them these metallic robot voices for no reason. They're introduced and then totally dropped. It's not like they are Bostic or something. Wearing masks. It was very strange.
Yeah, like Phantom of the Opera masks. I'm going to agree with you. That is really a lame moment. Like, why are we afraid of these kids? We're not.
Yeah, and I think it was to try and introduce a scare because I think they were having trouble besides bringing the grandpa back or showing the parents being hit by a car. Like, they can't really do those things effectively, I guess. So they're just introducing something. I think screenwriting-wise, they probably looked at it and they're like, okay, so nothing scary has happened and it's been 15 minutes, so what do we do? Let's put in robot teenagers. The best moment by far for me is Bostic being mauled by a dog. I just think it's like the strangest slow motion, like, oh my God, they're going to kill Bostic.
Yeah, I mean, it would be one thing if he actually got mauled, though, but he just literally just trips.
I know.
Runs in front of him and he trips and then has some of the worst I'm injured acting I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it hurts my leg. It hurts.
For me, I guess the scariest moment would probably when Miss Clove has her like freak out with the insane laugh.
So bizarre.
And even that, I'm not saying that that's scary, but for me, that was probably the scariest moment of the episode because you're right. There's just not a lot of scares to be had here.
Yeah, fully agreed. Oh boy, next up, Hungry Hounds. This has the lowest rating on IMDb, and I think it has my lowest rating of all the episodes. I hope it does.
I have a couple. This actually will tie my score for Lonely Ghost and One Other Tale.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't love it, but I feel like the acting in this episode for me saves it a little bit because I really
totally agree.
Yeah, because everything else, I gave the scares a 1.
Me too. Same score, and that is even stretching it. The only reason I gave it a 1 and not a 0 is the John Lithgow-looking ghost caretaker guy, because there is no villain.
Yeah, there's not.
There's a distinct lack of villain, and when they try and introduce one, it is like the cutest puppies, the least threatening dogs in the world. Like it's like people on set were just asked to bring their young dogs because they couldn't afford trained dog actors. It was awful.
Yeah. There's like one single moment when she's up on the hay bales, I think, and the dogs are like coming up at the camera. That's the only moment where they look even slightly menacing.
But even then, I was so confused by the plot of this because I couldn't figure out where the threat was. And I still couldn't explain the plot. I like very vaguely the Mont Petit Rouge thing, like, and how the horse ties into it, I have no idea.
Right? What?
Yeah.
Nothing about it makes any sense. Like when he's like, you should have fed the hounds.
Yeah.
You couldn't, no one else, this girl died or whatever. Like no one else could feed the hounds when she died? What? Yeah.
Well, and they introduced the horseback riding as this forbidden thing, and then this reveal of her on the horse is meant to be like, I feel like I'm supposed to be like, oh, the horse. But like, I have no idea. Like, what are the stakes here? The setting for me was great. I think the attic was really cool. I think the acting was pretty great generally. But the plot was just like mind-boggling.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the setting is pretty good. Like there's some locations that could be legitimately scary.
Yeah,
but they're just not because of the plot. But like you've got the cemetery, you've got the the woods at night, but
it all felt like bad YA fiction. Like it had this like undercurrent of romance or something, but I couldn't really figure out like that. Just was very odd. There was one part I loved where they use the Ouija board to get the code to the chest. I was like, well, that's clever because it's just like, without being something stupid and over the top and bad makeup, we get across that a ghost is like facilitating them on figuring out whatever the story is. And it was the closest semblance to me of like plot. But by far the lamest moment was the Hounds. I do not understand an episode based around medium-sized house pets. Like, it was so weird.
Yeah, it was again across the board. I gave it low scores. The only thing that lifted it up at all was the acting, for sure.
Yeah, I ended up giving it a 4 out of 10 total.
Okay, yeah, I had 4.25. So
Yeah. On to Super Specs. I think this is probably the most remembered episode for a lot of people, at least up in Canada. Like, people, I think this is synonymous. The show is synonymous with these glasses and seeing these weird putty type creatures running about. What did you think of this?
So overall, I enjoy this. It doesn't actually have a super high rating for the lack of. I think the setting and the scares are pretty weak.
Terrible.
But I think the plot and the acting is okay.
Yeah.
And can we? I just need to talk about the soundtrack to this episode for a second. The wacky music that plays every time those specs come out. I was like, by the end of it, I was just like, yeah.
I know.
Yeah. It's just rocking.
So bizarre. It was so weird. I thought you were going to say, can we talk about that there is a black character named Weeds, which just is like, why? How was that choice made in the writer's room and they thought that was going to be okay?
It was the 90s. I guess that's the only thing I could think of.
This is actually something I'm not going to name drop too much, but the Rachel Blanchard thing, I chatted with her on my first day on set with her. I couldn't help but be like, I review the show and I really like your actor, whatever. And we talked about their casting on the show and how at the time they were like really applauded for their diverse casting choices in the show, which like now is kind of lost on us. But I think for the time, especially to have a couple with a black man and a white woman, I think at the time in a kid's show was like something. Again, to name him Weeds, I don't think advances the conversation very much around this. And to have him kind of be like an unwitting dope a lot of the time, doing voodoo and stuff. Like, there's just stuff that you're a little like, I don't know what this does.
His book, The Voodoo for Dummies, or like,
boy.
Like, what?
Yeah.
It also looked like it was handmade by someone. It was like,
agreed.
Like, so just someone like, yeah, no, it's totally, it does voodoo. It's legit.
Yeah. Speaking of our introduction to Sardo, what do you think? If you had to choose, Sardo or Vink?
I would probably choose Sardo every single time, because the thing about Sardo is that to me, he's not a villain. He's just an idiot. And I love that he's an idiot. And the salesmanship aspect of things. I love that about him, but There's no menace in anything I've ever seen him in thus far.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know, I'm torn on it. The Sardo thing to me is like, as soon as he's in an episode, you know the plot. It's the same plot with Sardo every single time, and it's always Gary just being like, so then they sell them this thing that goes wrong. And then he sells him this thing that goes wrong. Or at least Vink, like, I guess he has the through line of being like a wacky scientist, I think, most of the time. I just find Sardo to be so irritating. Generally in this, I found the acting to be pretty strong, like you said. And with including Sardo, like, as much irritating as he is, he's committed to that bizarre character. There's little to no plot and next to no scares. I gave this a 2 out of 10 for scares, because I just find just don't wear the glasses.
Yeah, I ended up giving it a 4. Because I feel like there's a couple moments that I'm probably rating it higher than I should have, because I feel like there's moments where there's good potential for scares, like.
Welcome back. We had a little technical difficulty. Talking about Super Specs still.
Yes.
I gave the acting an 8 out of 10. I really liked it. And at the end of this, we're going to kind of nominate our favorite actors and least favorite actors and villains and least favorite villains. But you know who was in this for me? It was Mary Beth, I think, more than Weeds. I don't know that I named her my favorite actor, but I thought that she was really great.
She's good. She does have a couple of moments that are weird, and I don't know if it's her acting or if it's what she's supposed to be reacting to. Because when
the teapot and the fireplace.
the fireplace. I was like, what is happening? Why are you reacting that way?
I know, and it's the most extended, like wandering through the house, like another thing where you're like, just get there. We get it. None of this is scary or like anything new. So the people dressed in black like tea. It's so weird. What I find very, very strange is that they go out of their way. The villains in this are not scary in the least, I don't think. Their presence, the idea that they're there and you can't see them, I guess that's scary. But like, why do they have to gender them? Like, why do they give some of them like a purse and like a necklace, I think, at one point, or a belt? You're like, it's just so bizarre. Why do they play basketball? There's just a lot of it that it was really like,
Yeah.
I guess because it's meant to be another dimension.
Yeah, I think the reveal at the end is that we're supposed to be seeing people just doing normal things, but then why are they always stopping to like look at her?
Gravitate to them.
Yeah.
Are they seeing a black version of her? Like, that's never really explained.
Yeah, and wouldn't they all be like terrified and backing away? Like that might be more interesting. You put on the glasses and you see these people running from you like you're scary. That would be interesting. Instead, it's just them like they're putties. They look like putties. Overall, I gave this a 5, which like I remember liking this episode a lot more, but it's just not it's not scary, and I find the plot to just be kind of like lifeless.
I'm actually not that much higher. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think for me, what saved it a little bit is the ending. I like the twist ending that it does not have the happy ending.
Yep.
Which also begs the question how Sardo shows up again, since apparently he's trapped in this crystal ball or whatever. But whatever.
They do that a couple times. I put that as my best moment, was the seance at the end, along with the basketball moment, but for different reasons. That's me being sarcastic. The final seance kind of thing is bananas, but I like the twist at the end. It's an interesting point to bring up because they do that a couple times this season where they throw in this tag at the end where you're like, and all is resolved, except it's not, and the characters are doomed forever, credits. And they throw it in as this last beat of like, nah, not so much. Like Pinball Wizard, they do the same thing, and I always forget about it where you're like, oh, phew, they got out. And they had like 10 seconds at the end to be like, no, they didn't. End. Which I don't know how I feel about that. It feels like this, I don't know, just like a tag.
It's a common horror trope, and so I think that's what they were playing off of. For me, it actually, some of the stories that have a little bit of a weaker through line, for me, it usually saves it a little bit if it's done well. There's a couple where they do that twist at the end where I'm just like, okay, you know? Yeah,
agreed. My least favorite moment we already mentioned, which is the teapot in the fireplace. That like extended walking through the house is just like, what? And it's asking a lot of her, of that actor, to have to deal with nothing. Like, it's bizarre.
Weakest moment for me is probably just Weeds constantly sprinkling cocaine on things.
And then flushing it down the toilet when it doesn't work. Like, it just screams of like a drug allegory. It's not good. It's not good. Next up is the Captured Souls, the Tale of the Captured Souls, with Danielle and Peter, everyone's favorite strange actor making strange choices.
So the acting in this episode for me is weird because I actually found Peter's acting to be good in the sense that he's unsettling, he's creepy.
Yep.
And that's what you want from your villain. But I felt like everyone else's acting was awful. I found the parents to be awful. To me, they felt like set parents, like maybe they were actually her parents, and someone was like, "Can you just stick around and say some lines?" Like that's how it felt.
That's interesting. I have almost the opposite. I will put the caveat. I hated Peter, but I think I hate him because it's like looking in a mirror. That is like the role I will always play and have always played. He's like, I just like, it's tough. It's like watching myself act. So he's not a bad actor. It's a very challenging role because he's clearly meant to be from another era, right? So they're trying to do this thing of like, he speaks very strange and kind of eloquent, but he's still a boy. And he's like flirting with her kind of, and we're not sure why. And it's like, so that's effective. I thought Danielle was great. I get what you're saying, I guess. It's a little stilted, but like, to me, she like carries energy with her, and I liked her parents for what they were. The thing is, the whole episode is hammy, right? Like, they're aging progressively, so it's all over the top. But I guess I found a lot of it more grounded in truth in some of the acting in this. I don't know. I
It
think I
might-
liked the plot.
honestly, It might be the writing that is affecting my judgment of the acting, because
Right.
a lot of the dialogue is terrible in this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking of the exchange where she finally pushes him back into his machine thing, and she's like, "You're a monster," and they have these back and forth things. I think she does fine in that scene, and he struggles in that. Like, I look at those moments, and I'm just like, to me, she has a better handle of the stakes. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, because like they try to give her that big heroic moment with like her catchphrase at the end, and it's just not a good catchphrase.
know.
Like it's not a good
You're right.
one-liner.
Well, you messed with the wrong girl, Petey boy.
You're totally right. I loved the plot in this. The thing is, this is another one. This is a theme for me. I found, especially rewatching these. The Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes I'm drawn to are the ones where the stakes are human. They're not like, there's no monster necessarily. There's no like cheesy kind of threat. It's a real thing. Like, your parents aging rapidly to me is this like, oh God, like this existential terror of death. And even a young child having like accelerated puberty, and like, it just like, there's something that is like really horrifying about that. And another example is The Tale of the 13th Floor. Have you reviewed that yet?
No, that one's. I think it's actually my next one after.
It's one of my favorite episodes because it's a brother sister, and the brother is like being tormented, and like they mess with his brain, and the sister's like feeling empowered because she's always played second fiddle, and it's this horrendous like the alpha guy being torn down because of his like there's just something very like bizarre about it. And I find it similar with this, where you're like, this hopeless family is being manipulated and being like killed, having their like life drained out of them. I loved the plot in this.
Yeah, it's a good. I feel like it's a good sort of ghost story. It's not a ghost story, but you know what I mean. Like, it's a good campfire story for sure. It is one of those where I feel like if you're a kid, because when I do my reviews, I always try to at the end say whether if I think I would have found it scary as a child.
Oh, that's smart.
Because it's, as an adult, none of this stuff is obviously scary, but
No.
it's one of those things
totally.
where but it's one of those things where as a kid you're not going to overanalyze everything. Like, when you really think about his like sucking souls to stay young and the kind of the way everything plays out, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, he's a boy when we first meet him, so why does he need the souls to stay a boy? And if he doesn't get the souls, he just immediately turns back into an old man when he was a boy at the start of the episode. What? Like, when you start thinking about those,
I thought he
with an adult brain.
She reversed his youth machine, and that's when he became old.
But she did. But she only reversed what he had stolen from them.
Oh, you're right.
At least that's the way it's presented.
I also love that he tracks who he's stolen life from on a little chalkboards with their images, and that he's stolen youth from pets. I was like, that is insane.
Yeah. It's actually pretty horrific when you think about how many people he's murdered, but it's
totally.
It is. And then he's kind of coming on to her at the end, like when he's like, "Joy, you could stay with me," and I was like, "Bro, you're like 100."
Oh. And when he's admiring her strength before we know why he likes her youth, and he's just like, "Oh, Danielle, yes, look at your arms," and like these very specific, like, ugh, it's so creepy. I put that as my like lamest moment, because you're just like, I guess it makes sense in retrospect, and it adds to him being creepy, but how bizarre.
Yeah, my lamest moment would be his sort of masturbatory soul stealing thing, where he's like climaxing in the chamber. I don't. It's so weird. So weird.
I do love was his lab being revealed. I think like there's a couple moments in these where like this show did not have a huge budget.
Yeah,
the budget gets bigger as seasons go, I think. But the way they do the lab, it's like pretty basic stuff, and I think you would appreciate this, as an actor too. Is like, they pull it off. Like, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty expensive, and like there's no part of it that looks as schlocky as some of the props that we see in some episodes coming up look.
Yeah, no, it's a great reveal. It really is. it kind of captures the feel of like the old Frankenstein laboratory, you know, like that kind of a thing. It really does kind of pull that feeling in. It's
Totally.
nice.
And while the setting isn't scary, some of the stuff like that redeemed it for me. So I gave the setting a 7. Overall, I gave this a 7.5, which I have a feeling is going to be higher than what you gave it.
Yeah, yes. I gave the setting a 5 on this one. Overall, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 because,
Oh,
like I said, I I think what really changed our ratings on this is the acting because
yes.
I think Peter was great, but I didn't think anyone else was, so that really affected my overall rating on the acting.
Yeah. Yeah, I genuinely thought the opposite, but I appreciate why. Again, it's too real. Peter's too real for me. Next up is the tale of the Nightly Neighbors, which I think is our first Betty Ann story.
No, it's her second. Laughing in the Dark was the first
Oh,
one.
that was a Betty Ann story?
Yep.
Wow, well done. I always thought hers were based in some kind of like folklore, but both of these proved me wrong, so I don't know what I'm talking about. I this episode the ones that deal with like real it's not folklore, but like dealing with vampires and that kind of stuff that we know so well. They verge on being a little bit cartoony, but I do think this episode manages to have some like actual suspenseful moments, which is rare in Are You Afraid of the Dark? What did you think?
I feel like the inspiration for this story is a good one because it kind of has that um, Fright Night vibe to it, where you
Yeah.
know you think there's a vampire next door. Although I feel like in Fright Night his basis for believing there's a vampire is a little more grounded than than in this. But yeah, I don't know if I feel like there was a lot of moments of tension. I see what you're saying. I do see where you're coming from on it, but
I love that there's a strange disease that hits the neighborhood. One of the symptoms is not only are people weak, that's fine. They clearly wake up with 2 gaping holes in their neck because they have a bandage on, and they never think like maybe you should go to a doctor. Like, I don't think that's just a disease.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty silly, especially when it gets to the like, oh, and more people throughout the neighborhood, and it's like, you know, somebody probably would have seen a doctor by now.
Yeah. I think the siblings in this, when I first watched it, I hated Day Day, but watching it this time around, I actually think they're both great. But looking at all of the child actors across the series, I think on that kind of scale, I think they're on the upper end of it. I think they're pretty good, especially Emma, the sister.
I gave the acting high marks, but the characters are garbage. That's the
Yeah, I think that's probably where I'm torn.
Yeah, because the actors do a great job in playing these characters who are trash. That's
Yes. Yeah. And the kid who plays the villain, like the vampire, he's terrible. Like, but he's a child, but he clearly like doesn't want to be there. They clearly, that end laugh is just like another instance where they're like, just open your mouth. I'm like, I don't know. We'll
yeah.
figure it out in post.
That was one of those things I thought like I understand what you're going for, but I feel like if you would have cast just slightly older, a child that was just
Yes.
slightly older, they
Yeah.
could have done more with it.
Yeah. Or creepier. There's creepy looking kids. They cast
yeah.
this like all American looking boy that is like very friendly looking, and they put fake fangs on him, and it's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you ever see the original Pet Cemetery?
Yes, yeah.
That little kid still
Totally.
haunts my nightmares.
Totally agreed. Yeah.
And he's younger than the kid I think that was playing this vampire.
Yeah.
Got someone like that, I guess. I don't know. He's terrible. He is.
Strange. I also, the mom, not the mom vampire, the mom of Emma and Day Day. She's gonna come up later when we're giving out awards, because oh boy, I don't know what it is. They like amp her up to 12. Every moment she has is just like, Day Day, the neighbors are here. Like, it's the most like stilted, weird delivery of every line she has.
I just love what she full on rams into the mailman, and then it's like, oops, sorry, I'm late. Bye. Like,
oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. Bye.
It's so weird.
Like,
It's so weird.
Man, pick up the mail, you ugh.
Yeah. She's my lamest moment. I said the mom's a bit over the top, which in a story about vampires says a lot. That a human character is too over the top. I gave my lowest mark is for the setting. I just think like the basement kind of stuff is good, but it's all a little like bright and the plot's fine. I thought the scares were good. There's no like real jump out scares, but like they do well with the suspense. The moment where like she's in the basement and there's like a fake out with Day Day surprising her that I thought was pretty good. And that building kind of tension and stuff. And again, the acting was my highest score. I think the kids are actually pretty great. I made fun of them a ton when I reviewed it, but in retrospect, I feel like they're pretty strong.
Yeah, the acting in the episode got my highest marks for sure. Setting, I gave it a 5. It was fine. It's just kind of average for me. It did. I felt like the budget, it was, I don't know, there was things about this that I was like, why are certain things in this episode lacking when you're just filming in a house? Like,
yeah, maybe they were saving up their budget for Pinball Wizard, which we'll get to later. Overall, I gave this a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. Okay, I gave this 4.75 out of 10 because I rated the plot and the scares pretty low. My weakest moment is when Day Day and her hiding under the table, and she's like half sticking out of the table.
I know, like give it another take, surely. Can figure that out.
Although I did love her magic lock picking skills or whatever, combo lock. I do this all the time.
Perfect timing too.
Why? Yeah. Why do you do that at school all the time?
Yeah. I think I already said my best moment was the suspense of the neighbors coming home. I thought that was really, like, surprisingly effective for the show.
Yeah, my best moment is actually near the start of the episode, and it's when they first see the neighbors across the street, and they're looking out at them, and then as a unit, the whole family just turns and looks back at the house, and the kids have to duck. To me, like as an adult, I was like, yeah, that's unsettling.
Yeah, nice one. Next up is Sorcerer's Apprentice. I feel like this is going to be a polarizing episode. I remember hating this when I reviewed it. I quite liked it this time around.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I enjoy this one. I do.
Yeah. I love the setting of an old high school at night. I think that's super creepy. I think the acting is pretty great. Possessed Dean is annoying as hell, and he puts on this weird affected accent, but the fact that he has a tough role in this, when he's not possessed, he's really good. And she's good throughout. Alex, I think, is really good throughout.
But see, I have to give him credit in the same way that I do with Sardo and Vink, because when he is possessed, he's going for it. Like he's there, he's in it. It's very theatrical what he's doing.
Yes.
You know,
and they give him tough lines. He has a tough role, and they give him some lines that are like, how do you deliver that other than with a strange accent that you've put on? Like,
I've done it. Rise, mighty Goth. Your apprentice calls to you.
I don't find this episode particularly scary. I think the villain is terrible. Like the Goth villain. The fact that he's named Goth. It has this weird undercurrent of like trying to scare parents in the 90s about goth culture or something. Because they all wear black and all of a sudden Dean is wearing a leather jacket when he becomes evil. It's just strange.
Yeah, and also like a lot of the stuff that's supposed to like the staff, for example, that just has this stupid awful wide open mouth that looks terrible. It doesn't look intimidating at all. Yeah. Like why not go for a smaller orb and a smaller mouth to fit that in?
The props department.
Yeah.
And for an episode that otherwise looks really good, the whole like basement of the school and like the pool area, and there's like some cool shots. Very strange. Like the lighting is odd, but they're doing it on purpose, and it's like stylized in an interesting way. But yeah, that prop in particular is like, wow.
Yeah, and Goth himself looks like you can see the creases in the wig.
Ball cap. Yeah, that is some dollar store makeup too. They just paint him silver over a trash can.
Yeah, in the same regard as he's going over the top as well. So I appreciated the acting there too.
Yeah.
But I will say when he's being summoned as a spirit, that's a no bueno for me, because the fact that there's the moment, and I mentioned in my video because it's just I laugh out loud every time it happens, where he's looking and then he hears the noise, and the ghost head can't turn, so he just kind of does this, huh?
Yeah.
Like,
100%. It's so weird. Yeah, in moments he's like all of a sudden very human. Like, well, haven't you been summoned? Like, it's a weird like series of steps they need to raise Goth. I gave this all pretty high marks except for the scares. The acting I didn't love. I don't understand the point of the like anthropology teacher. I guess she like introduces us to the concept of Goth, but like her return at the end was an unnecessary twist. It's another one of those everything's fine, or is it? Yeah. But she's so non-threatening. It just seems, I don't know, it's weird.
It also really doesn't make any sense when you think about it at the end too, because it's like, well, if you can put these anywhere, why has Goth not been summoned? Are you getting thwarted at every high school across the nation?
Completely. Yeah, it's very strange. And why do you need a bunch of teenagers to do this? Like, you've chosen the most unreliable people to raise this.
Yeah, like Goth. why don't you do it? You're there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know the chemicals and herbs involved, the 17 herbs and chemicals. My lamest moment was anything with that teacher. My best moment, I just love Dean and Alex's relationship. I think it's like one of those like undefined, unlike Super Specs where they're clearly dating. This one is like they're just really good friends who like are supporting each other, and there's some like genuine. Again, they're both really good actors, and so I think they have this immediately believable relationship where she's trying to get him out of this rut, and like their end moment after the whole thing happens and they're laughing about how like the horror that just happened to them. It's all really believable, and like for a very out there episode, pretty like grounded in truth.
Yeah. I'd say my best moment is probably when it's shortly after Dean turns and she's like coming after him, and he has that flip out moment in the corridor.
On stage.
Yeah, where no, not even on the stage. It's before that when she's I think she's following him downstairs, and they're in like a stairwell or something like that, and he kind of like just gets all crazy with her.
Yeah.
Because again, that's like it feels very real, and his menace feels real, feels more real than Goth for sure. So I appreciated that. I would say my weakest moment is actually in the room with the stage where he runs.
His run is so weird.
Out the door, but then that's immediately followed by him and his goon squad riding off on their bicycles, and it just everything.
I know, like, in green fog, like bright green fog.
All the menace in this episode just gone right there. It's just anything was just gone.
What did you give this out of 10?
I gave this actually a 7 out of 10, and I think maybe I gave it a little higher marks on the acting and the scares, because while I don't feel Goth was intimidating, I felt like there were some really good moments throughout the school with the zombie students, and even the teacher from the beginning who has her little moment.
Yeah.
Like I'm possessed too. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I gave it a 7.75. I had pretty high scores. Plot was 8, acting was 9, setting was 9. The scares I gave a 5. I just found like, I don't know. I like the plot of it. I like the like construction, but there was no moments that like stick out to me as memorable in any way. No like images. There's an episode coming up that I like. There is an image that is the most striking of the whole series for me. It didn't have any of those, right? And that's kind of what I look for with scares in this.
I mean, it did have a waterfall out of nowhere, but that's...
I know. The basement waterfall. There's clearly like a sheet of plexiglass. Like maybe, I don't know, fix that pipe.
Yeah, like why is it there? It bothered me so much when I was watching it. It's like...
Very weird. Well, it's like I also like every high school in Are You Afraid of the Dark has an abandoned pool. I guess. I mean, maybe they have that in the States, but up in Canada, no go.
You know what's funny is I constantly ask that question about things. So when I question something, I'm like, is that how it is in Canada, or is that how you think it is in America?
I think they're projecting that's what they think it is in America, but no, made up. Next up is a assume maybe equally polarizing episode. It's Jake and the Leprechaun. I think this is either loved or hated by fans. I want to be sensitive to our favorite storyteller Eric in his moment of mourning, but I don't have any interest in the like cultural legend type stories. And this one where they're just like they make up a legend and then that justifies the end of it. Like the whole basis of this is the your mine be yours, yours be mine thing is like, that's not anything. Use that line like everybody knows, and that's going to come up in this story. I don't know. I hate that. There's a few of the episodes that are like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, we both said we don't care for Eric in any shape or form. This felt like the episode where they were like, nobody likes Eric. We need to let's give some sympathy. Let's say his pop died.
Yeah, now you can't hate him.
Yeah, and I went into this thinking I was like, oh, I'm gonna hate this because it's an Eric story.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm Irish, and so I had some thoughts about the folklore that's being presented.
So you grew up with yours be mine, mine be yours.
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely. But I was surprised by this episode because while I think the kind of Irish stereotypes that are used and the misrepresentation of the folklore is appalling.
Saints and stars.
Yeah.
I do feel like that it was actually a pretty decent story. Like there was some good creature effects, like good makeup, and some, I don't know if I would call them outright scares, but I think the makeup went a long way to presenting a threatening villain for sure, and the acting.
Yeah, I think I was probably unfair on this episode. I didn't find it scary remotely. I thought like there's the one moment where he really transforms at the end on the stage that I thought was well done. The makeup was really well done. I just found nothing really like, I found it more whimsical. Like it was like watchable. The plot is interesting, but as far as Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes go, it didn't have any kind of like real fear in it for me. Again, I tend to like those real scares as opposed to like monster scares or being transformed into a frog. Like there's no real threat in that to me.
Yeah, which the more you think about this episode, the less sense it makes. It's really bad. I mean, there's so many things like when it's revealed at the end or near the end that I'm blanking on the main villain's name because it's not Aaron. That's right. Yeah. It's not a name you would expect. No. When it's revealed that he's a banshee, and I'm like, no.
Right.
Banshee is a female, like it literally translates to like lady spirit or something like that.
Female ghost, right?
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. It's not whatever you think it is. It's not it. Like I know it was the '90s and you didn't have the internet, but somebody could have Encyclopedia Britannica or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's so bad. But then even like when he's becoming a changeling, and he gets the elf ears,
yeah,
then he turns into a frog, and I'm like,
I know.
What?
Changing into what? I know. But I felt like it was like what they could manage as far as effects. And like, again, it was interesting. There was enough like changing sets and cool moments, I guess, but some was just odd. And they also, I don't know what the current PC term is. Little person? There's some indelicate treatment of that character. And like with the hiding and the scurrying about. And I don't know. It just was odd. I gave the scares a 2, which I think I regret. I just feel like most of the scares in this were gross out. They weren't like scary. They were things like eating spiders that like they're cool moments, but they weren't scary.
Yeah, they weren't like shock value scares or anything like that. I think I gave it a 6, but I really do think a lot of that is the makeup of Aaron doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's not, like you say, there's not a lot of like legitimate scares throughout the episode.
Yeah. I also found the acting to be salvageable. I didn't like, it was all very broad, but it should be. That's like, again, the story is bananas. There's no way to really ground this episode in any kind of real fear. It's all over the top. I gave the setting an 8. That was my strongest mark for this because I feel like it was like an interesting concept to have it be a theater production, the backstage of a theater and stuff. Aaron's dressing room, I think, is pretty well done. That whole kind of sequence.
Yeah, I also gave it an 8 for setting.
Yeah. Overall, I gave it a 4.5, though. The plot and the scares really dragged it down for me.
Okay. Yeah, my overall is a 7 for this one, which I, again, was not expecting to rate that high, but I felt like the acting, especially from the adults, lifted it up, so I gave that pretty high marks, and the setting high marks, and, you know, plot and scares I gave a 6. So
I think when I reviewed this the first time, I really liked it. I think I ended it with just like, wow, that was like for an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, it was pretty like coherent. But I should ask, did you, when you finished watching these again, did you adjust any of your scores? Because I totally did.
Well, again, doing these scores just now, I had to kind of reevaluate everything because
Yeah.
when I do my review episodes, I'm just like it either, passes or fails as
Yeah.
far as so I did have to think about these in different terms, but
Yeah.
overall, because I think all my videos have been done in like the last year, my thoughts on them didn't really change all that much.
Yeah. Because, I mean, there are some episodes in the series, especially later on, that I like probably wouldn't give high marks to as far as any of these categories we've made up, but I love them for some other reason, some other intangible reason, right? The lamest moment for me was the yours be mine, mine be yours. It's just like he introduces it and then it saves the day, and it's so like, I don't know. But the best moment I think we already chatted about was the reveal of Aaron as just like in his true form. I thought was really well done. The makeup was super effective.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on best moment. My worst moment is when um, he's visiting the actual leprechaun and he's like angry that he had that list and he comes back and he's like going on his tirade and he walks through this little picket fence and there's like a gate, but if you look,
Oh yeah.
there's no fence on either side of the gate. Like it's just a gate with no fence on one side and like
Right.
a tiny
Oh
bit of fence on
God.
the other. And I'm like, why is this here? I've spent so much time focused on why that was there.
Yeah.
It was like that's to me is like the lamest part of the episode.
Again, their budget. They're saving it for Pinball Wizard. Next up is Dark Music. This was one of my favorite episodes to review the first time I did it. This was the one I'm talking about with the most memorable image, and you must know what it is.
Because I'm going to agree with you probably.
Yeah. It's so bizarre. The whole episode is bizarre. It's like eerie. It has this kind of like plot-wise, it's pretty well trodden territory. It's very like Little Shop of Horrors, kind of has this like twist. I actually think the setting is pretty great. I like the idea that they've inherited this house from the dead uncle. Was his uncle, I think?
Yeah, uncle.
Yeah, the basement I think is pretty creepy. The thing that derails this, if there is something that derails this, the acting is pretty rough, especially Coda, the bully guy. That's awful. He's written terribly. I don't put that all on the actor. He's just like, he's an unnecessary addition. I understand why they have to kill him off and stuff, but like, I don't know. But this is one of those ones where the main character turning into the villain, I think, is super effective.
Yeah, it has a great twist ending. This is one where I feel like that ending is earned, but then what
Yes.
kills it for me is that they immediately dial that back because I think this is another Eric story, and so when it ends and he has that just serial killer look on his face, and I was like, oh my God, he just fed his sister to this thing, and then Eric's like, nah, he didn't, but she listened to him after that, and I was like, oh, you just killed your story.
You know they had to do that though. There was some like PTA group that was like, no. We cannot have brothers killing sisters.
Yeah, that's a constant thing I have to remind myself of when I'm reviewing this. I'll get to like a point in the story and I'm like, oh man, if this is what happens, that's gonna be great. And then I'm like, wait, no, kids show on the Nickelodeon in the night. It's like didn't happen. So
and as hammy as the scares are, the carnival barker thing and the red eyes, the doll is superb. It's like the weirdest choice. Again, it's this like to me this is an episode with some pretty like relatable scares. Everyone's scared of their basement as a kid. Like, I understand the kind of crawl space cellar thing, but to have a bright human-sized doll with articulated arms but nothing else there's something so scary about this to me. And she screams when she gets pulled back. Like that would have stuck with me as a kid forever.
Yeah, I agree. It's great. I even found the carnival barker to be pretty good. I think what kills that scene is the cut to the awful skeleton.
I know.
Like it would have been more intimidating if you would have just like, I don't know, thrown some contacts in or put some like fake teeth in the carnival barker and he grabbed the kid. That would have been great. But the Halloween store skeleton is
And they
terrible.
could have shot that better too. Like again, they very clearly just superimpose like this flat image with the door around it, and it looks terrible. And like, surely you could have just taken your carnival moment with Zebo and just like put a door frame, show the inverse of it, and him looking in from the real carnival. Like, there's could have been anything there that would have been more interesting.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. This did have another one of my most hated characters, and that is the sister.
Easily.
She, like, from the fact that she doesn't know how to play video games.
Or the way she holds the controller like it's running away from her.
What are you doing?
So weird. There was nobody on set that would have been like, Christina, fix your hands. What's wrong with you?
But also their mom. Like,
Oh.
every time the sister did something, and the mom was just like what
I
are you
know.
doing? Raise
You
your
do
child.
Yeah, and I don't own a ladder, so I can't put up my vertical blinds. I liked the mom, but she develops a weird New York accent when she goes downstairs to the cellar, and she's just like, "What are you talking about? It's a cellar." Like, out of nowhere, this is just developed.
She has some of the weirdest moments. There is a delivery
Oh,
of
yeah.
hers it's when I think it's the first time that he's encountering is it the doll? I think it might be the doll. He's encountering
Yes.
the doll, and she comes up to the door, and she's
Yeah.
like, "What are you? What are you doing
you
down
doing?"
there?" Like like just the lines she's given and the
know.
way she says them, you're like, "What is happening here?"
Hey, you! What are you doing?
I think they were asked to make what should be a 20-second sequence into a minute and a half sequence, because every line she says is drawn out to be like, "I'm gonna turn the light on," or like you're not even sure what she's doing, but that whole sequence was so scary. I loved it.
Yeah.
Lamest moment was the Coda collision right off the bat. Everything with Coda, his weird dad in the striped pants.
His Beetlejuice pants and his
Yeah.
gut.
He
Looked
looked
like-
like a wrestler, like some kind of bad small town wrestler. It's
I thought he was
awful.
Cousin Eddie from the Vacation movies. Like,
Truly, yeah. Yeah, and my best moment is clearly, that might be my best moment of the entire first season, is that doll.
is a doll.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I mean, the doll is great for sure, but I think my best moment is the very end when he just has that glare when it's like,
It's pretty good.
feed me and I'll give you whatever you want, and you see the sister nagging and that you're like, yeah, this guy is definitely going to be a serial killer for sure. Is great, and I have to agree with you. All the Coda stuff it's just dreadful. I was
All
just
the fight sequences.
yeah.
Wow.
This kid that you
Punches.
could clearly take. You could like
Yeah.
Coda presented no menace whatsoever.
Yeah.
So
Again, this is one that I think I may have adjusted afterwards, because I gave it a 7.75. It feels low to me. What drags it down is the acting.
mhm.
I gave everything else pretty high marks. The acting I gave a 6 out of 10. Like, it's probably even lower than that, but I think I adjusted it just because I'm like, I can't give this lower than a 7.75. I love this episode. I think it's really good.
Yeah, this episode probably has my highest rating for scares. I actually gave it a 9.
Nice.
9 out of 10. Overall rating is 7 for me on this
Nice.
episode. So
Next up is the prom queen. Kristen's own full costume. What did you think?
Wow. So I'm not a fan of Kristen stories. I'm just not. This episode did not do anything to improve that. I'm not even saying that these stories are bad necessarily, but it's not a good ghost story. There's no scare. What did I give this for scares? I think I gave it a 1. Yeah, there's no scares in this episode for me. I felt like the only time
Yeah.
there was a moment that was a fake scare, it was a fabricated scare, is with the old lady with the tea tray in the library.
It's so bad. You didn't like the seance thing on the river? I thought that was good.
With the gas bubbles,
The bubbles.
Like someone
It's weird.
farting out the water.
But
No.
I like, they make it like a chase where all of a sudden they think this thing. I mean, in the end, nothing comes out of the water. Just like the woman scaring them just has tea. It's a lot of fake scares. You're right.
Yeah.
I think the strength of this, and I think we're going to disagree. I gave this pretty high marks, weirdly high now that I'm looking at it, because you're right. It's not scary. I gave it a 10 out of 10 on plot, because I actually think, and this is embarrassing, the first time I watched this when I was reviewing it, I didn't see the end coming, which, like, in retrospect is pretty obvious. But I didn't realize literally until she turned around that she was the ghost. And I like, for this show to trick me, I have to give good marks too.
I feel like as a kid, you definitely wouldn't see that coming, for
Yeah.
sure. As an adult, when I was watching it through for my review, the first time when she was like, Keen, and I was like, okay, she's the ghost. Like, nobody says
Yeah.
Keen in
Right.
the 90s,
Also, why is she delivering flowers to herself in the very beginning?
right?
Seems like a loophole.
Just wandering around the graveyard, giving flowers to yourself in hopes that somebody would come and escort you out of the cemetery.
Yeah.
It's one of those plots where if you think about it too much, it makes little to no sense.
Completely. I liked Dee Dee and Greg in this. I thought they were fine. Jam is terrible, but Jam is also written terrible. He has the worst lines, worst jokes, unnecessary. They think they're adding in humor, I think, to the episode because there's this lack of scares. But man, he's rough.
Hey, we're just having a goof.
And honestly, I don't think that's acting though. I think that is the way the character's written. I feel like the actor
Agreed.
he's the red herring. I feel like he's the character that you're supposed to think there's something sinister going on with.
Yeah.
But then we get that, like, it was all a goof.
Yeah. Oh God. I quite like the seance. I said that was my favorite moment of the episode, just because I think it is like the most tense, and the thing in retrospect where you're like, well, of course she knows what she's doing in this or whatever, because she's, when you find out she's the ghost, she's all of a sudden running this thing, and the three characters coming together makes no sense. Like the way they establish these strangers being like, great, we ran into each other in a graveyard, let's do this search. Like it's all so contrived, but I like the seance. My least favorite moment was the library. It just goes on so long and there's so much exposition that it's just like kind of silly.
My least favorite moment is the ghost story surrounding the prom queen, because it makes no sense. She was waiting outside a cemetery for her prom date.
You're right. It's really weird. I wanted to give it a 10 out of 10. I regret it.
And then she's run down in the fog. And then it says the next day they buried her in her prom dress. Not if she was mangled in her prom dress. They didn't bury her in her
just
prom
wanted
dress.
to get rid of her. They wanted to hide her from the parents. Maybe she fell into a grave. She was hit by a car into a grave, and they're like, you know what? Pour it on her.
I think that makes more sense.
I gave it a 7.25, which feels very high now that we're talking about it.
I give it a 4.75 out of 5, because I think the setting was pretty good. There's way too many lit shots of a cemetery. Like that opening is just like 5 minutes of cemetery shots for no reason.
So long. Her delivering the flowers to herself is so bizarre and long.
Yeah. But I gave the acting, I gave a 6. The setting I gave was the highest marks. But yeah, I gave it a 1 on the scares. I just didn't do anything for me.
Yeah,
I think the best moment, this seems more jokey than realistic, but is the appearance of Dean from The Sorcerer's Apprentice making a return as her prom date.
Oh, of course. Yeah, you're right. Oh, I didn't even clock that. You're totally right. That's exact. Is he from other things? I feel like that actor's like went on to play some other stuff.
He might have. I don't know him from anything but this, but I mean, he's got a good look,
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Finally, our last episode of the season, and another, I think, pretty memorable one, along with Super Specs, is Pinball Wizard. Gary's getting the good stories. I said this is kind of maybe one of the most iconic Are You Afraid of the Darks. I remember this so distinctly as a kid, and not being scared of it, but wishing I could do it. Like, I want nothing more than to be in a human, like, life-size pinball machine.
Yeah, no real scares, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally. I put the setting as a 10 out of 10. I feel like they blew the budget, as I've mentioned several times on this episode. Not that it takes much to just like get an abandoned mall, but like for shooting, there's the like scale of the mall they did really well, and they light it really interesting to make it look fake. Like they make it look almost miniature in an interesting way, almost cartoon, but all clearly in a real mall. And then conceptually, like plot-wise, I really like how they introduce the elements of the game early on. They introduce the water gun, the executioner guy. Like you see glimpses of these things from music box, and then once she enters the game, you realize kind of the context of it.
Yeah. In fact, you realize the context of it well before the main character does.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like the last 5 minutes of the episode, I think, where he's like, it's the game. And you're like, no kidding.
I know. They could have made the homeless person / witch a little bit more subtle and maybe treat that a little bit more sensitively. But
Yeah.
But I liked it. I don't know. I don't have many complaints about this, except it's not scary. There really is there's no moment, no like iconic moment in this that I will remember, other than maybe the very end. But
I actually thought the acting was pretty weak on this one.
yeah,
Yeah, the main character, I remember my criticism because this is actually not that long ago, only a couple months ago that I did this one. That it just, part of it is probably the writing, but there's just nothing about the character that he doesn't really react to anything in any sensible way. Like he's never afraid. And he's just, I don't know. There was just nothing about him that made me root for him. He was just, to me, there. Like,
that is a very good point.
he was a means
You're
to
making
get.
me question my ratings.
I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, no. It's justified. I just am a fool. You know what? I liked the girl. I thought she was pretty good, and I want to say she's in something else, or at least maybe appears in another episode here. She looks like a Breaker High type or something. But I thought she was good. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question for you because of her. Okay. In Canada,
Yes.
how do you say tiara? Or do you say it like she said it?
Does she say tiara?
Yeah, she says tiara.
The throne and the tiara. We still haven't got the tiara.
I would say tiara, but there are so many Canadianisms in the show. There was another one. Oh, in Prom Queen, he says buried, which is like just not even Canada. That's like a distinct prairie thing. That's like Saskatchewan. And there's another one. Oh, cemetery, he says. And it's like in one sentence, he says 3 Canadianisms. And I'm like, oh, there had to be someone on set to say, like, dial that back.
And a couple of days later, they buried her. It's a big cemetery.
Because now there is. Anything I've shot in Canada, they will, like, flag the abouts and the house and that kind of thing. But, yeah.
In season two, I've noticed a lot of people saying sorry.
Yes. Yeah. And you'll notice the A's too. Lava, drama, that kind of thing. It's rare. It's regional still in Canada, but yeah, they stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, sorry, I had to bring that up because I was just curious about it because she says it and I was just like, wait, who says tiara?
The thing is, I've trained a couple of those things into myself just through voiceover now, but I've had to learn them. Java was a big one. I would say Java before. Now I say Java. I don't know. I don't think I ever said tiara, but I may have. I would say tiara now.
Okay, so it probably is just a regional thing, not a personal choice on her behalf, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. My lamest moment in this was when he pulled the twist again at the end, where he pulls a small gun out of nowhere, and you're like, well, we haven't. If you'd established that the rules of the game are whatever you want to make them, it's a weird last thing to conclude the entire story that is just this like Deus Ex Machina, like out of nowhere.
Yeah. Also, his catchphrase at the end too is like, "That's the thing about real life is you get to make up your own rules." And I was like, "What?"
No. Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't flag that along with killing your sister. Like, it seems like a dangerous thing to preach to young boys.
Yeah.
What was your lamest moment?
Oh, lamest moment. There's so many in this episode. And I mean, look, I love this episode. Don't get me wrong. But there are parts where the budget just did not, sure, they were saving it up, but there's just elements of it that are just really bad. In fact, there's a thing that was pointed out to me after the fact that in the when he summons the throne and then he starts like riding it through the mall, there's a scene where you can see the crewman behind it pushing it.
I'm so glad we're doing this because guess what my favorite moment is?
Is it that? Is it that?
Yeah. But not because I didn't clock the guy. You're absolutely right. I'm sure that happened. I have this like thing as a kid. Do you remember Casper, the like Christina Ricci movie?
Yeah.
There's a moment where they ride that like the contraption that goes through the house and shaves him and prepares him through like a chair. I was like, for some reason, I have that in my mind as being so much fun. The idea of riding through a mall that is a pinball game on a chair. I remember that as a kid. Like, that moment sticks out to me. So I think that was my favorite. But it is like, it doesn't contribute anything. It's very strange.
So weakest moment of the episode. Oh man, I'm gonna have to probably go with just the opening, the shot the whole shop. The shop bugs me. I don't understand
Yeah.
the point of the shop, what they sell, anything like that. Everything about it was wrong to me. And
Yeah. Well, and
so
the twist at the end is so strange because they do so little to establish the shop owner as being menacing in any way. And then
yeah,
at the end, you're like, well, he's the villain? Like, what?
yeah, and like you can tell right at the beginning because they're not subtle about it. He leaves the shop, and then our protagonist doesn't even wait 10 minutes to
No.
make sure that
Yeah.
the owner forgot something, and he's back there playing that game.
Yeah.
But they show the shop owner outside, stops, looks
Yeah.
back, and gives that like, oh yeah, he totally ignored what I said look, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, that's not going to end well for anyone.
No. So
Um,
sorry. What
yeah.
was your best moment?
Best moment is probably aside from her hissing like a vampire, I actually really enjoyed the witch.
Yeah. She's for sure the scariest moment because there isn't much, but like she presents a different kind of threat, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
she's pretty ineffectual across the board, but I
Yeah.
do feel like the makeup was good and her affectations were pretty good. Aside from
I
like,
know.
what is
I
that?
hated the locker opening moment too. I just remembered that where there's like goo thrown at him and like it's just like the cheesiest, unnecessary
It
moment.
felt like the most Nickelodeon thing about the show.
Totally. He got slimed. I gave this a 7.25 out of 10.
I wow. My rating was so much lower than that. It's that I'm kind of embarrassed. I gave it a 4.25 out of 10.
Whoa, we got some differing ratings on these.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
like
I
it.
had the scares and the acting were pretty low on mine, which drug everything else down. I gave the setting an 8 because you're right. The mall was just a great setting.
Yeah. I gave
So
the setting a 10. That was I think my only 10 out of 10 setting wise. I just thought like comparatively to like a house, I thought it was pretty interesting.
yeah,
So why don't we do this? What were just to recap, do you have your top 3 episodes?
my top 3 episodes would be the Tale of the Dark Music.
Yeah, I have that.
Um, let's see, the Tale of Laughing in the Dark,
Yep, me too.
and actually I have two more that are tied because Sorcerer's Apprentice and Jake and the Leprechaun are also at a 7. So if I had to choose between those two, though, I would probably go with Sorcerer's Apprentice. I really like Dean in
We
that.
have the same top 3. After all that, I thought we were disagreeing wildly, but my top 3 are all tied at 8. And I put them in order just because after seeing it, I was like, well, my favorite out of those 3 is Dark Music, then Laughing in the Dark, then Sorcerer's Apprentice, which shocked me. I do not remember liking Sorcerer's Apprentice that much, but that was a revelation. Do you have your bottom 3 accessible? I can do mine if you want to look.
Yeah, go ahead and I'll
My
find.
third lowest is Jake and the Leprechaun, so that's where we clearly differ. Second lowest is Phantom Cab, which I think the only reason it's not the lowest for me is like there's a bit of it's the pilot episode. I have to give it some like nostalgia. And my lowest by far is Hungry Hounds. It just is like I hated that episode so aggressively. And so does IMDb. I have the IMDb ratings as well, and it's by far the least favorite at 7.4. And the ones we listed, Dark Music and Laughing with the Dark are the highest, I think.
My 3 lowest rated episodes are Tale of the Lonely Ghost, Tale of the Hungry Hounds for sure, and then Tale of the Pinball Wizard. They all had actually the same score, 4.25. But if I had to choose one that was the worst out of all of them, Hungry Hounds, hands down,
Awful.
worst episode of the season.
Yeah, I think people generally agree. And it like that is for sure. The other ones I can remember a bit about to be like, oh yeah, Zebo the Clown, and I remember this and that. I don't remember Hungry Hounds even. It seems like a different show.
Yeah.
Bizarre. So the other thing we were going to do is talk about who we thought our worst and best actors were and scariest and lamest villains. What I did was kind of come up with 3 nominees in each of these categories and then pick a winner. So why don't we list our nominees and then we'll say who we each pick. So worst actor, I tied Buzz and Denny in Phantom Cab, but if I had to choose, I'd say Buzz from Phantom Cab, the older brother. The mom in Nightly Neighbors, because she was atrocious, and Christina in Dark Music.
Okay. All right. So I would say for me, nominees. honestly, you said Buzz from
Yeah.
Phantom Cab.
Yeah.
I think for me, Denny is probably.
Yeah, they're both pretty bad. The thing is, they give Buzz bad lines to say on top of being a
Yeah.
bad act. Like he has all the bad, like, you squirt, you little dweebo. Like they give him all the made up teenager words, and it makes it a bit rougher for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, you have Buzz. I'll go Denny. We'll split the difference there. Let's see. I think also Lex from Nightly Neighbors. That was his name, right? Lex was the little kid vampire.
Oh, the kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like
Yeah. He had no right being in the show. So, and then, and then probably the main kid from I'm blanking on his name, but Pinball Wizard. I just didn't care for him.
Yeah, that's fair. Ross was his name.
Ross.
I surprisingly, and not giving it to Christina, I gave mine to Buzz. Because the reason being, it's close, but I think Christina serves a purpose. She has to be horrible because ostensibly he's going to kill her. In the end, like, his mind, we can't be like, oh, that's out of nowhere. It has to be like, oh, I could get rid of her and get another bike. Who's your worst actor?
I'm gonna have to give it to Lex. I know he has very little screen time, but it's just so bad across the board. I mean, sure, the parents didn't have great accents, but they were salvageable. They were passable for a kids show. This kid had nothing. It was like never. He looked sleepy, like he or bored or just something. Like he just. I don't know.
He needed blood. It was a character choice. No, he was bad. Who are your nominees for Best Actor?
Ooh, Best Actor.
If you only pick one person, I kind of sprung this on you. I just couldn't choose, so I went with 3.
Yeah, I mean, Beth, for sure, is one of my tops from Lonely Ghost. Like I mean, hands down, just across. I mean, I'm a little bit into season 2 right now, and she is still the most memorable child character that I have seen.
Yeah.
You know, I would say probably either the 2 siblings from Nightly Neighbors, which is weird because one of my worst is from that. But while I don't like their characters, I think both of the actors portrayed those kids and their annoyingness like perfectly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I have. I'm going to do honorable mention to Mary Beth from Super Specs. I thought she was good, but I didn't make the list. I think Beth I have as well from Lonely Ghost. I have Emma from Nightly Neighbors. And I have Dean from Sorcerer's Apprentice. But I think I give it to Emma in Nightly Neighbors. I think she was my favorite.
Okay. So you're going to support the kid that wants to murder her neighbors? That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
They're definitely vampires. Are they, though?
100%. I love that. We didn't really touch on that, but that is hilarious that she's like, the only plan is we have to kill them with no proof.
Yeah, you don't want to maybe test that first.
Yeah. Who do you give Best Actor to?
I'm going to give it to Beth. I am.
Yeah, good. Because I feel guilty about not doing that, so.
Yeah.
That's a pretty, challenging role. And especially as an actor, too, I have no doubt she got a ton of hate from that. Not that it was, like, accessible to just, like, tell actors what you thought of them in the early 90s, but even now, she's got to look back on that and be like, man. Watching things like this where we say she's the worst. But you're the best, Beth. We like you.
Yes. You, the actress, are terrific. Your character is horrific, and we applaud you for making us hate that character.
Yeah.
And you're a snitch, too. You're a chicken and a snitch. I couldn't stand being you.
Let's go with lamest villain, because to me this is very clear. My nominees, I'm putting up Sardo and Dr. Vink. I just don't like them. I understand the nostalgia, but villain-wise, they're pretty lame. The third nominee and the winner for me, by a landslide, are the Hounds in The Tale of the Hungry Hounds.
So the Hounds, they're up there for me for sure. I can't put Sardo in that list because I don't consider him the villain of the piece. Again, to me, he's just an idiot.
Yeah,
things that he shouldn't.
You're right.
To me, the villain is the woman in black, basically the real wizard from the other dimension.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm gonna go. I agree with you, Vink, 100%. He's not. He's a great character, but he's not a good villain.
Yes, agreed.
And then I know this might offend your sensibilities, but I got to go with the ghost from The Lonely Ghost. Like,
Fine. She's not a scary actor.
yeah, but she's also, you know what? I'm going to take that back because she's not the villain. You want a villain, and the villain of that episode is Beth. So I'm gonna retract that statement. And I guess it's hard to come up with something different, but you're right. The Hounds are just, it's like she opens that door and pound puppies come running out.
It's pretty bad news. Hounds, worst villain. How about your scariest villain?
Scariest villain. I think it's probably Zebo, but it's a toss-up because am I counting in the dark music? Am I counting the root seller as the villain, or am I counting the serial killer that the main character becomes at the end?
You know what? I have my 3 nominees in front of me. Number 1 is Zebo. Number 2 is the doll in the dark music. Number 3 is Andy in the dark music. So I had the exact same question, and I just nominated them both.
Perfect.
But I chose Zebo as the winner because I couldn't decide between the doll or Andy. And I just think Zebo's like so memorable and becomes like an icon. He comes up several times in the series. Just his name. I don't think he appears in another episode, but like they talk about Zebo a couple times and call people Zeeb and stuff.
Yeah, I was curious about that. I wonder if that was a reference to Zebo, like, you know,
I think it is. And you see a lot of like, they'll do imagery of him. So they'll do like, there'll be like a sign in the background of some shots that have Zebo the clown. It becomes a recurring thing, but yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So Zebo's the winner, best scariest villain. That kind of wraps it up. Do you have any final thoughts before we talk about our draw?
Final thoughts? No, look, it's it is weird being an adult man, going back and reviewing this show from being a kid, but look, nostalgia's everything right now. You know, the world's in a dark place, and just going back and having fun with these things, and I love it. Yeah, a lot of the show is not great, but it's not like it was bad. It's just, it's a product of the time, low budget, you know what I mean? But it's so much fun.
Genuinely loved it as a kid. Like, again, some of it hasn't aged super well, especially like scary wise, but we're not kids, so why would it be scary? And also some of it does hold up. Like I think some of the performances and the like storytelling in it is still like pretty effective, especially in some later episodes. I'm hoping that you and I can keep doing these as you get further into your reviews. It'd be awesome to do further seasons as well. I do plan on finishing my series eventually, but it's taken me 12 years to get through 40 some odd episodes, so I don't do them frequently, clearly.
No, I would love to. I mean, I do basically an episode a month, so I mean, it'll be what, I think the 3rd episode from season 2 is being put out this month, so it'll be a while before we can do another one of these. I mean, unless you want to do one sooner, I don't mind doing it, because I've actually watched most of season 2 already in preparation for what I have to do. But
nice.
Yeah, I had fun with this.
We'll do them every October. How's that sound?
Hey, perfect.
We convene. So you got some pretty cool merch to do a giveaway. Why don't you tell us about that?
I did. So I commissioned a little bust of that. I will have an image up on the screen. It's a bust from the creature from the Tale of the Dead Man's Float. And if I try to give you scale, it's maybe yay big. It's not huge, but it looks really, really good. And I got it specifically as a giveaway for your viewers.
It's amazing. It is my favorite episode, and I just want to enter the draw, but we're going to be generous, and it's very generous of you to give this away. So how about in the comments, why don't we have people list what their top 3 episodes are of this season? 1, 2, 3. And if you do that, you'll be entered into a draw, and then one of us will do a giveaway video, and someone's going to get that cool bust of the orange chemical pool monster, that's probably one of my favorite villains, too, of the whole series. I think he's awesome.
It's hands down, it's the most terrifying thing they ever produced on this show. Like, when you see it, you're like, wait, I'm watching a kid's show?
Yeah. Oh, that whole episode is like, the acting in it is really good. And yeah, that holds up for sure. I'm excited. That's season like 3 or 4. It's late, I think.
Yeah, I feel like it's a ways off, because it's one of the the new members, like it's the smelly kid. Tells that.
His name's like something too on the nose, like Porco or something.
Yeah, like I feel like he only tells like 1 or 2 stories throughout the whole run. So
yeah, but he gets a good one. It reads like a Gary story though. It's got the underlying romance that he secretly wants in every one of his stories. So sad. Well, anyways, this is super fun.
Yeah, I had a blast doing this. It was great. It's not often that I get to talk to someone else, to another adult man.
I know. I know.
These shows. So
yeah. So yes, comment below, and we will. One of us will release another video soon with the draw. Thank you for watching.